My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, we're in Wednesday of Holy Week, just the last day before the Passover arrives. So many of the words and sentiments that will be transmitted during the evening will stay engraved in the memories of the apostles and in your memory and my memory. These moments in Holy Week are so deeply rich in content and meaning that if you saw all this as a long timeline and you zoomed in tight into each minute, we would have really just pressing riches all around us. And we're still drawing and nourishing ourselves from all these intense moments. It's really part of our collective memory, mixed and intertwined with pain and sorrow and joy and wonder. I mean, so many poems and books and reflections of the saints have centered on these powerful moments of the Paschal Triduum. They're really the initial moments of the Passion narrative that must be deeply etched into our mind and in our imagination. And now, with what care and love the apostles prepared the Paschal Supper. They're not fully aware of the transcendence of these moments, but we know that later on they certainly remembered everything. Think today in the Gospel of today of the man with the jug. Jesus had chosen his house for the Passover, but the apostles had come to tap him on the shoulder and come to clarify the full extent of that choice. His house would be used to celebrate the Last Supper. It would be here that Jesus would wash their feet, that he would give the commandment of love, that he would institute the Eucharist. And it's as though Jesus thought to himself, well, I can use this place. And indeed in the Gospel of St. Mark it is said that this man the man with the jug, will show them a large upper room furnished and ready. In other words, it would be adequate, it would be good. It's this image of it being a clean, well-ordered room, a kind of a symbol of our soul, like it has to be when we receive Holy Communion. A clean, well-ordered room. That's why we say, come into my house, that you may, I'm not worthy that you come into my house, Lord. And we say that in communion. But of course, it is also here that Jesus would announce that Judas would betray him. He said, one of you will betray me. And wow, this caused lots of distress, lots of consternation. Just the very idea of betrayal provokes this emotional upheaval. That one line about betrayal was the source of Leonardo's 1498 fresco of the Last Supper in Milan. And one sees it like a tremendous wave of reaction in front of the serene figure of Jesus in the center of the painting. It's this tremendous reaction to this one sentence about betrayal. And we see Christ and Judas simultaneously reaching toward a plate that lies between them, and even as Judas himself defensively backs away. And indeed, a few years after this painting was completed, a famous humanist of the time, Giorgio Vasari, described the scene like this as he stood in front of it. He said, Leonardo imagined and has succeeded in expressing the desire that has entered the minds of the apostles to know who is betraying their master. So in the face of each one may be seen love, fear, indignation, or grief at not being able to understand the meaning of Christ. And this excites no less astonishment than the obstinate hatred and treachery to be seen in Judas. End of quote. That's from Giorgio Vasari. So it's a very striking description of the scene, and indeed Leonardo wanted to give the colors a special luminosity using some experimental pigments directly mixed into the plaster wall, mixing the paint with the plaster, but unfortunately it started deteriorating a few years after it was painted, and it's an image of what happens, if we betray you, Lord, if we betray you, Jesus, through sin, well, we begin to deteriorate like that fresco did. If we betray our friends, if we are unfaithful, that image of God is in us. It's still there, but it begins to crumble like that painting. And Jesus had called Judas his friend. He still loved him, even if he knew about his betrayal. St. Paul says that scarcely can someone be found who is ready to die for a just man, although such a man might be found. But God shows his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. From St. Paul's letter to the Romans. Now everybody knows this fresco of Leonardo, his Last Supper. Everybody knows that it's a masterpiece. And indeed many efforts of restoration have been required to bring back like some semblance of its prior beauty. But the same could be said about our own soul, our own friendship with you, Jesus. We're building that friendship now. We're restoring it now in these 10 minutes. That's why we're listening to you in these 10 minutes. And perhaps, during this Holy Week, we can do some work of restoration of the soul, accompany our Lord in the account of the Last Supper, then the episodes of the Garden of Olives, his arrest, or where Judas comes with the soldiers and that painful kiss that Judas makes of Jesus, and the subsequent trials, and just the entire narrative of the Passion, which we read, we have already once read in Palm Sunday, but we'll go over it slowly again on Good Friday. Doing this can really restore our soul. It can re-establish any lost connections with the Lord and bring out the luminous colors that are there under the surface, just like that marvelous fresco. I mean, imagine if people had just left the fresco of the Last Supper just to itself. Probably there'd be practically nothing left. And it was so exposed to humidity and to bombs and to the peeling of the paint. But numerous restoration projects were undertaken over the years. And, this Holy Week can be like a restoration project of our soul. I read a story recounted recently by Raniero Cantalamessa, who is the papal preacher there in the papal household. He said, I knew an intellectual woman who professed to be an atheist. One day, she got the kind of news that leaves people stunned. Her 16-year-old daughter had a tumor in her rib cage. So they operated, and she returned from the torment of the operating room with tubes and drainage tubes everywhere and intravenous feeding tubes coming out of her body. And the girl was suffering horribly and groaning. And she did not want to hear any words of comfort. So knowing that her daughter was devoutly religious and thinking that it would please her, the mother asked her, do you want me to read you something from the gospel? Yes, Mama, read me the gospel. And she said, so what do you want me to read to you from the gospel? She said, read me the Passion. So the mother, never having read the gospel, ran to get a Bible from the hospital chaplain. And so she sat at her daughter's bedside and began to read. After a while, the girl fell asleep, but the mother continued to read silently in the semi-darkness up to the end. She said in the book, she said later on in a book that she later wrote, that the daughter fell asleep, but the mother woke up. Her reading of the Passion of the Christ, had changed her life forever. Isn't it? It's a beautiful example of what can happen when we really enter the Passion. Our own experience of reading the Passion cannot leave us unaffected, but it will restore a new drive, a new devotion, and respond to the great love that God had for us, even when we were like a ruined fresco. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you've communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.